Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Granger and welcome to my presentation on the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. I chose this specific book because I was a biology major for a while in college and I had heard numerous times about the HeLa cells and what all they had done for science. Once I saw that the book was on the suggested list provided by Dr. Rick, I knew I had to discover more about the HeLa cells and how they were related to diversity topics for this course. A little background on Mrs. Henrietta Lacks. She was born in Virginia on August 1st, 1920, and grew up on a tobacco farm. She married in 1935 to her cousin, David Day Lacks, and bore 5 children. The family eventually relocated to Baltimore during World War II in hopes of creating a better life for her and her family. While she was pregnant with her 5th child, Henrietta had a feeling that something was wrong with her. She had described the feeling that she had a knot in her stomach. Her family just told her that she was just feeling the side effects of the pregnancy. After giving birth, she still felt that something wasn't right, so she asked her husband, Day, to take her to Johns Hopkins. The doctors did a thorough examination of Henrietta, and it turns out that her feelings were correct. Henrietta was diagnosed with cervical cancer. She returned to Johns Hopkins frequently to get treatment for the disease, but after numerous radiation treatments, Henrietta succumbed to the disease on October 4, 1951. Prior to Henrietta's death, her treating doctor took samples of her tumor for research purposes without her or her family's knowledge. The physician labeled the cells HeLa after the first 2 letters in her first and last name. After her death, the doctors asked Day if they could perform an autopsy on Henrietta and take samples of her tumors. Day reluctantly agreed after the physician said that their testing could help their family and children one day. This was the beginning of Henrietta's immortality. Her cells were the first ones to live for an extended amount of time and replicate again and again. This was the beginning of cell culturing as the science community knows it today. Her immortal cells, as they're known, helped make many scientific breakthroughs. One of the most notable was that her cells helped scientists develop the polio vaccine during a time where the disease was rampant in the United States. While Rebecca was attending a community college biology class at the age of 16, her professor was giving a lecture regarding cells. At the end of the lecture, he mentioned the immortal cells and wrote the name Henrietta Lacks on the board and said nothing else. This sparked Rebecca's interest as she vowed to discover the woman behind the immortal cells. Rebecca received a Bachelor's of Science in Biological Science and a Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Nonfiction. Her educational background led her to a career as a science writer, giving her credentials to write a book such as The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. She is a contributing editor to Popular Science magazine and also has numerous published articles to her name. While her credentials afford her the knowledge to write about science, her race and economic background made it challenging for her to get information about Henrietta from her family. This brings me to my next slide. Dr. Rick wanted us to read these books because they offered insight into issues regarding diversity. The core issues that are present in The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks are that of race, economic standing, and medical practices and procedures. Henrietta was an African American woman who lived during a time of severe racial tensions between whites and blacks. Throughout the book, Rebecca writes about how the Lackses were treated throughout the process of Henrietta's illness to the after effects of the immortal cells. Johns Hopkins is a hospital that is located in Baltimore that was built primarily to help the more impoverished populations, more specifically African Americans. However, even with a hospital designed to help minorities, they were still treated differently. Each time Henrietta came for treatments, she had to use the entrance labeled colored. According to the book, African Americans felt that since they were not as educated as the white doctors, they didn't really ask questions when it came to medical treatment and procedures. They just went with whatever the doctors had to say because the doctors obviously knew best. Because of this, doctors often took advantage of the situation and collected samples of tissue and blood and anything else that they needed for research purposes without asking permission or consent from the patient or family. As Henrietta's cells continued to gain notoriety throughout the science community, in contributing to medical breakthroughs, her family was left in the dark that part of Henrietta was still in fact living. While on the surface this book does not seem to have too much to do with higher education, it does if you look at the diversity aspect of the book and take away the scientific portion. A great deal can actually be learned. The main lesson that I took away is that people need to be respectful of everyone when it comes to diversity, regardless of their differences. Meaning, just because they are from a different race, economic, or educational background doesn't mean that you treat them any differently. As Rebecca was conducting her research by contacting Henrietta's husband and children, she was met with great reluctance. Henrietta's family wanted to know why a white woman wanted to know about their mother's cells. Why did the family never know about the cells in the first place, they kept asking. Time and time again, Henrietta's family told Rebecca that people made a great deal of money, and yet her family still lived in poverty. How is that fair? Eventually, Rebecca gained the family's trust as she vowed to tell the real story about the woman behind the immortal HeLa cells, while also sharing her scientific information and knowledge with the family. Doing this, Rebecca was able to break the barriers of race, economic standing, and education. Also, as the years went on, the medical and scientific fields made great advancements in the fields of research. Laws and guidelines were implemented to protect patients and their families against the wrongful collecting of samples for research. Rebecca Skloot was a very thorough author in regards to not only the story of Henrietta, but also the science portion of the book. She detailed how she gathered the scientific information, how she got in contact with the Lax family, eventually gaining their trust, and finally putting everything down in writing. Therefore, I do not have any questions that I would ask the author. She described in details the trials that she had to overcome when it came to gaining the Lax's trust, and she also described how she gained their trust. So my final thoughts. Honestly, I have to say that I was somewhat dreading this assignment because I didn't know if I could truly get into a nonfiction book. I was completely wrong. I could not put the book down and completely understand why this book was a New York Times bestseller. Everything about the book screamed of intrigue and truly made me open my eyes when it came to discrimination. It makes me sad that a certain race and economic backgrounds were treated with such disrespect and no regard. However, having those feelings makes me realize that I will never treat people like that. Having that mindset will only aid me in my higher education career because I will respect everyone that I encounter on campuses and respect the diversity that they bring. Higher education institutions thrive with diversity, and completing this assignment has afforded me the opportunity to grow a lot more, not only as a student or professional, but also as a person. Thank you.